When it comes to Tim Burton's filmography, Mars Attacks is generally considered to be one of his weaker efforts, since so many characters end up dead and has a somewhat nonsensical plot. However, it has also developed a cult following for pretty much those exact reasons. Tim Burton even said he wanted to make the movie in the style of Ed Wood, whom he had just done a biopic about, but only made a little more smartly. And that's honestly the best way to describe Mars Attacks, that it's intelligently written to be stupid, if that makes any sense. And today, I would like to go over exactly how it accomplishes that. And there will be spoilers for this movie ahead, so in case you'd like to watch it first and don't want anything ruined, you should probably click off this video and come back to it another day. This will be your only spoiler warning. Okay, so to start off with a famous quote from notable comedian Judy Holliday, "You have to be smart to play dumb." Which basically means, if something is to be both stupid and good at the same time, then it has to be very smartly written. Because let's face it, there are plenty of stupid movies out there that weren't well written, and as a result didn't really turn out to be good or enjoyable. If something is to be both nonsensical and enjoyable, then the writing actually has to be pretty clever. And that's what Mars Attacks is going for in the way it's written. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and in quite a few ways intentionally bad, but written in such a way so that it can't actually be considered conventionally bad. I mean, sure, the movie is far from a masterpiece, and is most definitely not for everybody. But when you really look at it, it's pretty easy to see why this is actually considered one of the better intentionally bad cult movies out there. Because when all's said and done, it's really meant to be a parody of disaster movies. And that's part of the reason for all the carnage, and why the characters desperately try to appeal to the humanity of the Martians long after it's obvious that it's a lost cause. Because it's poking fun at how disaster movies will often depict needless death in the name of special effects, as well as often have a twist where the monsters are actually misunderstood and not really evil. So here, the carnage is specifically not meant to be enjoyed in the traditional sense, and instead show just how horrible that level of destruction would really be, as well as show just how evil and merciless the Martians really are. That no matter what anybody says or how much they try to reason with them, they just want to kill everybody and take over the Earth to get their kicks, with absolutely no misunderstanding on their part whatsoever. And this parody also ties directly into the moral of the movie, which is that you can't trust authority figures. Because every person in a position of power throughout the entire movie completely messes up their job or only makes things worse, always ending up dead as a consequence, while the Martians are finally defeated by an unassuming teenager and his grandmother who just happened to be listening to the right song. And this is in keeping with the parody of disaster movies, as the government or somebody working for the government is usually the one to save the day, and the unassuming characters are usually either the first to go or survive heavily injured if they're lucky. But also keep in mind that this moral is, just like almost everything else in the movie, meant to be tongue-in-cheek and thus not supposed to be taken all that seriously. But where this movie gets slightly more clever in its parody is in how it decides to kill off its characters. Because again, while it depicts the destruction and general loss of life as horrible instead of glamorous like disaster movies sometimes do, it doesn't do this so much when it comes to the individual characters. because in a complete reversal of disaster movies, which depicts mass death as not a big deal, but individual deaths as a tragedy, this movie depicts mass death as a tragedy and individual deaths as not a big deal. Because the movie establishes a bunch of different characters, most of whom are either morons, unlikable, or big jerks, and then shows what happens to them when the Martians attack. And while all the jerks die at the hands of the Martians, most of the good or nice characters end up surviving the ordeal. In other words, the movie decides to have fun in killing off its characters, and does so by establishing that said characters weren't great people beforehand, and thus the audience wouldn't have sympathy for them. Sure, some might argue that the movie still takes it a little too far in this department, but that's what they were going for all the same. Now, the only two real exceptions to this would be Michael J. Fox's character, who's not a jerk so much as henpecked, and the president himself, who, while not the smartest person, is very much a nice guy at heart. He does what he believes is best for the people, gives the Martians every chance to form a peaceful alliance with Earth, and feels really guilty when everything spirals out of control. But because he's the highest authority in the land, and the moral of the movie is that you can't trust authority, he pretty much had to die despite probably being one of the best people in the movie. So in order to make up for it, his death is given a lot of fanfare and is ultimately treated as a tragedy. And tellingly, his death is the only one in the entire movie to be treated that way by the narrative, since he's the only really good person the audience gets to know before he actually dies. Now, as for Fox's character, the viewer simply doesn't get to know him long enough for his death to mean much to them. But that is the main reason they were able to get away with killing him. Besides, his death is also meant to signify that nobody has star power or plot armor in this movie, and that anybody is fair game for the Martians to kill. But other than that, anybody else to die is previously established to either be a jerk, idiot, or not a very good person. In fact, Tim Burton even let the character of Brian Williams survive, despite the fact that he was supposed to die in the original script, most likely because he felt the character's motivation of just wanting to get home to the family he clearly loves, as well as risking his life so that others could escape, made him too sympathetic for this movie to actually be killed off. Now, of course, there are many other ways Mars Attacks parodies disaster movies as well, such as the random appearance by Tom Jones playing himself, and turning out to be almost superhuman in his abilities, which parodies how celebrities will sometimes appear in disaster movies just to be killed off. And tellingly, he not only survives the movie, but gets others to safety as well. Or the fact that the Martians are deliberately made to look and behave as stupid and crude as possible to parody the, shall we say, low-budgetness of some disaster movies and the unfortunate consequences that it could sometimes have on the monsters. Really, pretty much everything concerning the Martians is just one big parody of the types of monsters usually found in disaster movies, up to and including the famous Martian girl who seduces a White House staffer to try and get to the president. So, to put it simply, Mars Attacks may not be everybody's cup of tea, or even a very good movie by normal standards, but it does actually work pretty well both as an intentionally bad movie and as a parody of disaster movies. Everything it's parodying is right on the money. The Martians' depiction is both ridiculous and genuinely threatening, and the movie knows exactly what to do with its characters. As I said at the start, sometimes it takes intelligence to make a movie stupid, And I think most can agree that a lot of thought went into the making of this movie. Sure, it might not be too evident at first, but that's part of the point. In the end, all I can really say is that Tim Burton definitely did what he set out to do with this movie, and I honestly think Ed would have been pretty proud of it. To what degree that can be considered a compliment, that is. Alright, I think that's everything I've got on that. So now why don't you all tell me? Do you believe that Mars Attacks is actually pretty well written in its stupidity? Or do you believe it's just a ridiculous movie that I'm reading way too much into? However you feel, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, you don't have to like this movie or agree with anything I said about it if you don't want to. You are just as entitled to your opinion as I am or anybody else on this or any other topic we discuss. And thank you all for watching. I really greatly appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.